Hello friends and welcome back to another video from my series Quick Thoughts On, in which I talk about different stories from the rich Star Trek franchise. 30 years ago, another new episode of Star Trek The Next Generation premiered, called Where No One Has Gone Before, and these are my opinions about it. Despite its title and the fact that some of the previous episodes of Next Generation were direct sequels or homages to previous episodes from the original series, this episode has absolutely nothing to do with the second pilot episode of the original series called Where No Man Has Gone Before. If it had, it would probably be a much more entertaining story. This episode doesn't star an arrogant jerk who has superpowers and becomes the villain. This episode stars an arrogant jerk who has superior knowledge, at least that's what he thinks, and he becomes the villain. See, completely different things. The villain of this episode, if you want to call him like that, is the psychiatrist from Monk. In this episode he plays a character called Kaczynski, even though he doesn't look very Slavic. And shouldn't it be Kaczynski with a Z? I had it originally written as Kaczynski before I checked his name in the subtitles. He came on board because Federation has allowed him to modify the Enterprise's warp engines, because he has done the same experiment on previous ships and always drastically improved their engines. Riker, however, doesn't like the idea of a stranger messing around with the engines, just like this week's chief engineer, Mr. Argyle or something like that. As I said many times before, during the first season they changed the chief engineers more often than I change my socks, so I'm going to ignore it right now. Both number 1 and the chief engineer object Kaczynski being here, because they tried his equations and absolutely nothing happened. Kaczynski also has an assistant, a mysterious alien known only as the Traveler. The Traveler is interested in Wesley and immediately starts to like him, and in some of the scenes it looks pretty creepy. They start the experiment and something goes wrong. The Traveler is intrigued by Wesley and starts to phase out, for a lack of a better term, and the Enterprise speeds above Warp 10. Even though later it's established that Warp 10 can't be reached because that would mean that you would be everywhere at the same time. But the Enterprise gets to another galaxy called M33, and I have to say, it's a beautiful special effects shot. Especially if you consider the thing that it's from 1987. Picard calls Kaczynski and wants him to explain what exactly has he done. Kaczynski tries to say words which sound like they were created by a random word generator, but at least he thinks he is able to repeat it and get them big hope. Picard, as typical for him in the first season, instead of making a direct decision, asks everybody for their opinion, and only Data wants to stay and explore, so they decide to give him another attempt and let him try to get them home. The Traveler is very tired, but Kaczynski wants him to work anyway. Wesley tries to interfere, but the Traveler goes to work, and who would guess? The Traveler phases out. Again. This time, however, also Riker sees it, not only Wesley, and because of the Traveler's health state, the Enterprise gets even farther, where no one has gone before. This new place is, however, very strange, and our heroes find it out pretty soon. For whatever reason, a pig in drag appears on the bridge, and Worf says that it's his pet Tark. Funny, I thought the Tarks are a bit like dogs. At least the previous iterations looked like dogs from hell, but no, this time they used a pig. Now, the interesting thing is that Tasha sees it. Why is that important? You see it in a moment. The Tark disappears, but then somebody throws a cat into the shot. They literally throw a cat into the shot. The cat is orange, but it's not Data's cat Spot. It's actually Tasha's long-dead pet cat. We then cut to Picard, whose turbo lift door opens in space. Picard quickly retreats back, and when the door opens again, it opens to a normal corridor. Then Tasha is suddenly with her cat in a sewer, and behind her are some annoying jerks who play with flashlights. No, they are not attacking her or anything else, they are just standing there and playing with their flashlights. So are they trying to annoy her to death, or what are they actually doing? Then we suddenly cut to Tasha on the bridge talking to Geordi. And he didn't see her in the tunnel. So this is the strange thing. Sometimes other people can see other people's visions, but other times they can't. Why? I don't know. Bad writing or bad directing? Then we see some old white guy play the violin, a young couple running from an invisible monster, and a young black woman dancing ballet in a warehouse. Again, an inconsistency. This is in her imagination, right? So does she imagine that she has her hair made up and her ballet dress, but still she imagines that she dances in a warehouse? And when Picard asks her what is she doing, she is suddenly back in uniform. So did Picard see her in the ballet dress or not? Why are these illusions so inconsistent? Picard has the most emotional vision. He sees his dead mother. He starts to talk to her when Riker suddenly interrupts them and she disappears. So Picard understands they have a serious problem and the ship goes on red alert. Dr. Crusher examines the Traveler, while Kaczynski finally gets his lesson and has to admit that he's a fraud and everything was the work of his assistant. When the Doctor manages to wake up the Traveler, he wants to have a small chat with the Captain. We find out that they are in this place where your thoughts can become reality and that they came here thanks to the power of a thought, because time, space and thought are the same or some similar BS. I'm not even going to pretend I understand the physics behind this, because the show itself doesn't pretend that the physics should make any sense. But when they talk about Wesley, the Traveler tells Picard that Wesley is basically the Mozart of physics and that he should take care of him. Picard then meets a guy who took the instructions of his tech support that he should install a firewall a bit too literally. Picard orders him to stop thinking about a fire and it disappears. I always thought this is pretty funny. So you are in a place where all of your thoughts become a reality and you think about getting burned alive? I think that Counselor Troy should have a talk with this guy. Anyway, charged with the power of positive thinking or some other BS, the Traveler repeats his actions and of course the Enterprise returns to the known universe. And of course the Traveler phases out again, this time forever, and he will never return. Or will he? In this episode finale, Picard calls Wesley on the bridge and makes him an acting ensign. I always loved how Wesley got promoted over the run of the series. When I've seen the series for the first time, I was jokingly saying that he will become a captain before he even attends the academy. And the story ends. This episode is stupid. It's stupid in all the correct ways. You know, a stupid story can be annoying or highly enjoyable. For me, it's a fine example of the second case. I'd say it's so bad that it's good. The truth is that I am a sucker for strange episodes, for stories in which you can't be really certain what's going on. So of course I will like an episode where all of the thoughts of our heroes can become reality. Of course the script has many problems. For example, why can sometimes other people see your illusions and other times they can't? Also, there is something a bit creepy about an older man having a strange, touchy relationship with a teenage boy. In many of the scenes, the Traveler seems like the stereotypical pedo uncle. If you don't like Wesley, you will probably not like this one, because it's one of the Wesley saves the day type of episodes. Well, I personally have nothing against Wesley, I only hate Will Wheaton, so I have nothing against this aspect of the episode. One of the most memorable things from this episode are the special effects. I love the in-camera 1980s effects. I know that this isn't an episode for everybody, but it's definitely an episode for me. I do enjoy it a lot. Of course, there are people who like to hear some numbers. On my scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is absolute garbage, 10 is a masterpiece, and 5 is average, I would give this episode 5 out of 10. Originally, I wanted to give it a much better rating because it's one of the better episodes of the first season, which is pretty sad. But if you compare this episode to episodes from much later seasons, this one is just average. But as always, these are just my opinions. Feel free to write your opinions down in the comment section. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and feel free to watch any of the previous videos on my channel. You should see links to some playlists on screen right now. And for me, it's time to work on my quick thoughts on video about the next episode of classic Star Trek. But it's an Halloween episode, so thank you very much for watching and see you next time. Bye.